In this week's episode, we take a look at the running back market and get you caught up on NFL injuries and contract disputes. Welcome to the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Our expert analysis on matchups and statistics will give you the edge in betting and on your friends. Use our insights to predict NFL outcomes like nobody else and always be the smartest guy in the room. Listen more for thoughts on the J.J. McCarthy injury. Will this stunt his growth or be just a minor setback? The Falcons load up for a run at the NFC South, adding Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons. And a few running backs got paid this offseason, but it's still a lot smaller market than other positions. We dive deep into why that might be. Welcome into the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Excited to have you with us. It is Thursday, August 15th, exactly 3 weeks until football season. Chiefs-Ravens, September 5th. We're excited to be with you here today. I'm joined by, he loves it when I call him this, the CEO, Scott Bushka, and the head of football ops, Cody Alexander. I'm your host, Sasha Bushka. Excited to be here with you guys. What's good today?
I just took some smelling salts to wake myself up, get ready for game day. Sasha said I needed to bring the energy, so let's go.
Don't be an energy vampire.
Cody, have you ever taken smelling salts?
No, randomly, no. As somebody who's been around football my entire life, I literally can say that I've never smelt smelling salts, nor have I ever seen anybody actually have smelling salts. So I'm sure that they were used at some point.
Yeah. How many? I mean, I don't know that this is really a laughing matter, but I'm just curious how many concussions you think you had in your football playing career. Like, I'll set the over under at 3.5.
I think I might have had one in high school during kickball camp. I kind of felt nauseous, but I mean, it went away. I played corner and receiver most of the time, so I was pretty much out on the edge, not somebody that was in there. But no, I would say that there's only one time that I say that I really felt like I might have had one.
Yeah, I can assure you, Scott was wearing that cowboy collar and sticking his neck in there the wrong way every chance he that. So, got to look big out there.
Dude, I used to rock the cowboy collar so hard. That the question made me think about if we should talk about Guardian caps live in games, but maybe that's a topic for another week.
Yeah, we can delve into it a little bit. We've got a good show planned. It's running backs week here at Field Vision Sports, so we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the running back market, bounce back running backs, up and coming running backs, and we'll do a quick preview of the QBs, which we'll be highlighting on our blog next week. But we'll start with some just general news and notes around the NFL. Start with kind of a sad one. Scott wrote a rousing article about evaluating the rookie QBs in their opening preseason games earlier this week. We put that out on Monday, and then no less than 48 hours later, or no more than 48 hours later, we find out that one of those said rookie quarterbacks will be missing his entire rookie season. That's J.J. McCarthy. He had a torn meniscus. He went in for surgery, and basically it was one of those where, like, it could be, we're going to find out during surgery how serious it is. Turns out it was pretty serious. He's going to miss the entire season. So just from your guys' perspective, obviously it's a bummer for him that he's not going to play an entire year. How much can something like this just stunt the trajectory of his entire career, though, missing an entire season of potential play time? Or do you think it's, in the long run, not that big of a deal?
I would say it's probably not that big of a deal. I think unless he was already projected to be the starter, that he had been taking all the reps, that the whole team has basically been around him. I think it'd be a much bigger deal if we were talking about the Bears and Williams. But I think with the Vikings, the whole process was going to ease him into it anyway. I think he was eventually going to be the starter this year, but I think this will be a great opportunity for him to just learn and really get involved. I'm sure he'll be meeting with the quarterback and the head coach on a daily basis, going through film. Basically, he's going to end up essentially being a coach this year is pretty much what he'll probably end up being in his role. So I don't really see it that big of a deal.
Yeah, I was bummed about this one. I'm sure not as bummed as Vikings fans or J.J. McCarthy, but I was bummed about this one because I thought he looked. I mean, as if you read the article, which I'm sure everyone listening read the article. As I said on Monday, I thought he looked really good, really dynamic, like both throwing the ball with his legs, pushing the ball downfield last week against the Raiders. I think he was eventually going to start, and Sam Darnold has caught a couple strays from us on this podcast before, which this is only episode 5, so I guess maybe it's going to be a regular occurrence. But I do not have confidence in Sam Darnold to be a super serviceable quarterback for the Vikings over the course of the season, and so I think it's going to be a big deal for Minnesota. I agree with Cody on JJ McCarthy. I mean, he's a rookie. In theory, he's got a long career ahead of him, and um, the offense he's playing, O'Connell's offense is not dissimilar from, say, an Andy Reid offense, which is complex and there's a lot to learn. So this gives him a chance to spend the year learning. He'll come back next year strong, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's a bummer for Vikings fans from a hope perspective, because I think, like, you go into the year, Sam Darnold's going to start the year, but I don't think you can, like, have Sam Darnold as your starting QB and simultaneously feel like you're a Super Bowl contender. So, and maybe you can't with JJ McCarthy either, but at least you knew, like, Sam Darnold's going to start the year, but if we lose a bunch of games early, at least we're going to see our rookie quarterback and see how we can be set up for the future. Now, if you lose a bunch of games early, you're just like continuing to roll out Sam Darnold or looking at Nick Mullins, whatever the case may be, and it turns a lot of the hope for the season off. The other, like, question you have to ask yourself is, like, yeah, he's going to do some sideline coaching. He's going to learn a lot, but he's not going to get any real reps. So then do you go into next year kind of in the same situation where you don't know if he's the week 1 starter, where you have another bridge gap? Or do you just say, hey, he learned a whole year, he's got to be the week 1 starter next year now?
Yeah. I think he will be the week 1 starter next year. I think Darnold's on a 1-year contract anyway. I mean, this is 100%. They're going to really lean into him now, just in terms of just the mental side of the game. I think the other thing too, like, Vikings fans probably need to understand that this was never going to be the year unless McCarthy just had some crazy. This year was all about getting the defense right, and I think they did. I mean, Dallas Turner looked fantastic. They're probably a couple, like, they need to have a safety at some point that's going to replace Harrison Smith. But it feels to me like they went and they're like, look, let's get our defense right. Let's get prepared. They're going to probably have a mid to high draft pick next year. They probably need to get that on a secondary player or another edge, something like that. They got the contract situation right. So to me, everything points for next year anyway. This is just putting a pause button on that, a hard pause on that.
Yeah. The biggest bummer might be for people who decided to get ahead. The overachievers who got ahead of things already had their fantasy draft and drafted Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. I still think he has a big year. I mean, they're going to feed him the ball. I think to me, you got to manufacture ways to get him in the ball. He's going to have a big year. Will it be at like a 1,500, 1,600 yard season? Probably not.
Dude, yeah. I can't. I honestly, I know I probably should stop talking about this, but I can't believe the number of people I see that are like, Sam Darnold's going to be good. Sam Darnold has never been good. He's been in. This is now 4 different places. He hasn't been good anywhere. And just because he was a top 3 draft pick, we still somehow believe that can be a good quarterback.
I don't think there's a world where Sam Darnold is like a top tier, like, he can win you a Super Bowl quarterback. There's a world where he's serviceable. And Coach O'Connell and the Vikings system with their weapons and his offense is probably his best chance that he's had to date to be serviceable. Obviously, he spent last year in San Francisco, but he never really got to play. So Shanahan would have been his chance as well, but he didn't play there, so we don't know. So, like, could they win with defense and have a middle? Like, could they make a push for the playoffs in the NFC? I think it's possible. But like I don't think
not in that division.
Not with the Packers. I think the Packers got it right on defense too. I think Jeff Hafley's going to completely correct that. That's a team too. Like, if the defense just plays at all adequately, they're pushing the Lions. So I mean, I don't see two wild cards coming from that. I think the Bears are going to struggle a bit. I think the offense is going to be good, but again, they got a rookie quarterback, and then you got the Vikings, obviously with Sam Darnold. The defense is going to be better, but you're looking at two mid, 7-win, 6-win teams there, with two teams that are probably going to win, upwards around 11, 12 games.
The division is a really good point. There's probably a better chance that they finish last in that division than that they make the playoffs. I guess my point is like their ceiling is probably 9 wins, and 9 wins is like a potential squeeze into the playoffs, but probably not out of the NFC North. So that's a good point. But like Darnold could be serviceable. He could also be awful, but that's probably your range of outcomes is like really bad to medium instead of like the other way, which is what you would want. I think that's a good transition into another team I wanted to talk about, a team that plays in a not good division and thinks they've got quarterback figured out now, and that's the Falcons. They just acquired Matthew Judon from the Patriots and signed Justin Simmons as a free agent. With Kirk Cousins coming in, and then also like the security blanket of if Penix is any good, just in case, because Cousins is coming off an Achilles. I think the Falcons have set themselves up. They've been competitive with absolutely no quarterback play the last few years. They added a couple of pieces on defense. Kyle Pitts, might come to fruition at some point. Drake London, people still think is good. I think the Falcons are the favorite in the NFC South now.
Yeah, I like this pickup. And then the other part of it that you didn't mention too is that they got Justin Simmons from the Broncos. Simmons was a cap casualty at Denver, and he's also over 32, but he played really well last year. Judon gives them an edge. If you followed Atlanta at all the past 5 years, they have not been able to have a pass rush at even like a remote pass rush. They've been the worst in the league for the last 4 or 5 years. This gives them an opportunity to now have somebody that can be pretty dynamic, knows the language. Flores is a Belichick guy, so the language is going to be very similar. Obviously, they play he plays a little bit more of a different scheme. Raheem Morris, sorry, but I do think that he's going to really add.
Yeah,
For the record, real quick before you go, Scott. Since I know most of you are listening audio only and couldn't see my face, I did mention Justin Simmons.
That's
good.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to come to your defense, Sasha, and say he did mention.
We could. Why don't we just redo that segment? Because I totally messed that up too. Because Raheem Morris is not a Belichick guy. I don't know why all of a sudden I'm still on Flores.
I've learned on this podcast, if you mess stuff up, it doesn't get edited out. So be prepared to get some angry tweets and DMs, Cody, for your mistake there.
Yes.
You're gonna have to learn to live with your mistakes. There will be no deleting of anything, including you saying let's redo this segment. So
yeah. I don't just very quickly. I don't have a lot of confidence in the Saints. The Bucks, I believe, are going to regress with Canales leaving. So yeah, the Falcons have to be the favorite. And if I remember right, they were actually top 10 in EPA allowed on defense last year.
I think they were like 11, but yes, very close.
Wow. Real fact. Sasha's a real fact checker this morning. Or this afternoon, whatever it is. So I agree. They should be the favorite. And we might talk about Bijan when we get to running backs here on the back end, but feels like he might be set up for a breakout year as well.
Yeah, I think the two safeties, Bates and Simmons, if Simmons can play still, and I still think he can, but you're looking at two of the best safeties in the NFL. Probably the Buccaneers in that division have an argument for a better duo of safeties. And then you now have a legitimate pass rusher. So to me, I think that I totally agree with you. This elevates them to a point to where they have an opportunity that if the offense can hit, everybody can stay healthy. This is a team that should push for the playoffs.
Yeah, 100% agree, and acquired a few players recently. So that's why we're talking Falcons. Real quick, just like kind of the evergreen topics of training camp so far have been Brandon Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb. We talked a lot about Ayuk last week. I don't think there's been a lot of movement in that, which it's crazy because when we talked about him last week, we are like, should we even talk about this? Because it might get solved before this even comes out. And now here we are a week later talking about it again. But I want to start on CeeDee Lamb this time. Some interesting things have come out from Jerry Jones since the last time we recorded. Like, there's no urgency to get it done. Just random quotes like that. Like, the season's 3 weeks away. Why would he say something like that?
Has Jerry pulled out of the race yet?
Not yet. Not yet. Steve,
I think
he's unburdened by what has been, Scott.
Yeah, I think as my good friend Des Bryant told me on Twitter, I think that Jerry was a bit misquoted on that lack of urgency. In terms of, like, they want to get a deal done. CD wants to get a deal done. They're going to get a deal done. It feels like, to me, it's just a matter of it not being that helpful that he's not in camp. Like, it certainly is going to, I feel like, lead to, potentially a slow start to the season. But I feel like that's going to get done. And quite frankly, I'm tired of talking about Brandon Ayuk, but that feels like it's going to get done too. I'm sure he's going back to the 49ers, although seems like there's a chance he goes to the Steelers.
Yeah, I think both of these teams have no business letting these guys walk. No one's going to give them what they deserve to get. And so it just needs to get figured out.
Yeah, it's I was going to ask you to put your Nostradamus hats on and, like, is Brandon Ayuk a Steeler or a 49er when the season starts? But it sounds like you guys are both leaning towards he'll still be a 49er.
What are the Steelers going to give him? I mean, to be honest with you, like, what are you going to swap George Pickens for Ayuk? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I feel like the 49ers know too. Like, if they give Ayuk to the Steelers, they get a first-round draft pick, probably some other pick off of that. One, the Steelers aren't just going to give all their draft picks just for a receiver. But I also think too, like, Ayuk, why would you go into that quarterback situation? It just doesn't make any sense to me at all. I think you're in a better sense. It's safer to stay in. I get the, money talks, but I think the 49ers, I think Ayuk also knows. I do agree with you, Scott. Like, not the Cowboys being in Oxnard probably has slowed this down, because I guarantee you, like, what Jerry's saying is, like, look, we're not going to really be able to sit down and nail this out, in California. This is going to be a situation that when they get back at Frisco and that they can bring him in and they can actually have a face-to-face conversation, that's actually when the real work's going to happen. But the time's ticking and we're about to run into the season.
Yeah. It's the CD one feels more simple and like a no-brainer, and it's going to get done to me than Ayuk. But with Ayuk, at least what it seems like from all the melodrama on Twitter, is the Niners are going to match what the Steelers would pay him, and they're essentially they're letting Brandon Ayuk pick. But if they match, I don't know why Ayuk is not going to just go back to the 49ers. And look, I guess kudos to him, because he used the situation to, like, get a market right deal for himself by going out and seeing what other teams were willing to offer. So he probably bumped up the annual dollar amount that he's going to get from the Niners based on this hold in that he's been doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That's enough CD Ayuk talk. We've been talking about it all off season. I was going to ask you guys about, like, preseason week 2 games you're interested in, but I pulled up the slate. I pulled up the week of games, and here on the website they've got every over under listed beside the games. And I'll just tell you everything you need to know about the preseason right now. Every single over under on these games is in the 30s, which means don't watch them.
Yeah, one to me, and I didn't know if you were going to bring this up, Sasha, but to me the most interesting or compelling thing that's going on with the preseason right now is, like, is it just me, or does it seem like there's potentially more injuries than normal? Like, you had the JJ McCarthy injury, you had the Hollywood Brown injury for the Chiefs, so there went Cody's breakout player of the year pick potentially, like 2 days after he made it. I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a hamstring. Maybe it's just a couple big names, but it feels like there's maybe a few more injuries than have been in years past
I
in the
don't
preseason.
know. I don't know how it compares to past years, but like to me, I'm always amazed that there's not more injuries. Like these guys are putting on pads for the first time, playing football for the first time, not just in preseason games, but in practices. I was like looking for news around the league before the show, like who's been injured, that kind of stuff. There's not a lot out there. Obviously, we know all the ones you just mentioned: Gibbs, Brown, McCarthy. But you would think guys would be getting little dings here and there all over the place. I actually don't think there's been a ton.
Yeah, I don't. The teams are so much smarter now than they were even just like 5-10 years ago about how to, especially with to use an NBA term, the load management, especially in the early parts of camp. These guys are also coming in extremely good shape. I mean, how often, other than just a one-off, have you heard of somebody, and it's usually a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, but come in and they're like, man, this guy is just not in shape. I mean, these guys are now making enough money that they can own their own gyms or, basically have a full-time trainer with them all the time. I think that to me is one of the bigger reasons that you're seeing a little bit more soft tissue and not necessarily these major injuries in the preseason.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to bring this up. It's not on our docket, but you guys are up to date on football, so I can go here. Because Cody was talking about players being in shape, have either of you heard about the reports coming out of camp of Keenan Allen being like a sumo wrestler now?
I did. I did actually read that last night, and aside from being kind of bummed for the Bears, I immediately thought about texting Cameron and being like, "Should we build this into our Week 1 model?"
Roma Dunze off the charts.
the headline I read said something to the effect of like, Keenan Allen has gained a bunch of weight, looks substantially slower than he's ever been before.
Yeah, I think I've heard like 235, and I even heard one outlet say like 245, and he was listed at 211 last year. So,
dude, I've lived in
pounds
Chicago. It's tough to live in Chicago in the wintertime. You got to put on a couple extra pounds to fight the cold standing on the top of a platform to get on the L. So
I think so too. A lot of that is you play in your playing weight. Like what you come into camp is never what you end up playing in. You're going to lose about 10, 15 pounds a lot of times.
Hey, Mahomes never comes in shape. Seems to be working.
Yeah, but he's an alien. Keenan Allen's a pro. He'll probably be fine come season. I will like refute one thing you said there, Scott. I don't know calendars that well, but I don't think it's been winter in Chicago since Keenan Allen became a Bear. It's quite nice in the summer in Chicago.
He's prepping for the winter. When you watch Game of Thrones, winter's coming, Sasha.
He's getting ready for hibernation.
Yeah,
no pun intended.
Exactly. They call it the Chicago fake out.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's hop out of the NFL news and notes. We'll go to a quick break. On the other side, we'll get into running back threat rate and more. You're listening to The Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Stay with us. Use our insights to predict NFL outcomes like nobody else and always be the smartest guy in the room. Welcome back into The Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Excited to have you with us. We got you caught up on the NFL news and notes, a few injuries, Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb. Now we want to dive into the running back conversation. We released our top 10 running backs earlier this week, as well as like top 5 receiving running backs, top 5 rushing only running backs. I want to start the conversation this way. Last offseason, the big topic was like 4 days a week on sports talk radio in Wichita, which doesn't even have an NFL team, was running backs being undervalued, having Zoom calls to talk about why are we undervalued and how can we get more money. And then this year, like a few of them got deals. So what changed between the two off seasons, and was it like a rightful market correction?
I think it was, and I think it has to do with the receiver pay. I mean, we've talked about what receivers a couple weeks ago. But basically, there's really only about 4 or 5 of them that deserve to just be paid whatever, back the Brinks truck up. I also think it's just the way the league is. We're transitioning back to more running formations, 12 personnel, play action's important. So I think running the football, I think people have kind of figured that out. Here's the problem that all started with the kind of the analytics versus the football guy crowd. What was this like a while back of like running backs don't matter, throw the ball every down. I think we're in the heart of like basically the spread had won in the NFL, and everybody just was like quarterbacks are so much better. We need to throw the ball, all this stuff. But you forget that like football's not baseball. You can't just kind of make this thing into kind of like a Moneyball situation where, football is a game that's physical and you have to be able to run the ball at some point. And so running backs do matter, but I also think that running backs are also it's one of the most loaded positions. Like you can find a ton of running backs and there's a ton of value. And I think that is part of the problem with this is that it's a short-lived roster spot and there's a ton of value because there's guys down the line that are just as good and you kind of just cycle through them every 4 years.
Yeah. This is a conversation I've had a few times on the radio, but like it's a supply and demand issue. It's not necessarily that running backs aren't important, but they fall off a cliff at a young age and you can go draft one that's productive immediately. I think a little bit of that too is like when you're growing up playing football, the best athletes, if they're not a quarterback, and not everybody can throw the ball, so not everybody can be a quarterback, they're probably going to be the running back on your Pop Warner team. And then so a lot of these guys come in and develop, and there's a ton of good running backs out there. Now, the way the league is now with receivers getting paid all the time, the best athletes when they're kids, they're not dumb. They're watching these contracts come through. A lot of them are going to go play receiver, and then the supply of running backs will go down, and it'll still be an important position. And like the pendulum always swings on this stuff. I think like 5 or 10 years, you might see, hey, there's not that many running backs out here. We need to keep the ones that are good and pay them.
Yeah, it's Sasha, I find it interesting that so when you started this, you started to say a couple guys got paid this offseason. And I've heard that, I've heard several people talk about how this offseason marked a change in us valuing running backs. Everything is relative. The Saquon Barkley deal, who's one of those guys we talk about getting paid, was 3 years, $37.75 million, right? So that's what, 12 and a half, a little bit over 12 and a half a year. And we've got Jefferson making $35 million a year. Like CD is going to hold out until he makes $35 million. We have receiver twos all across the NFL making between 25 and 30 million bucks a year, right? Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, etc. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I even think the like linebackers, which is the generally undervalued position on the other side of the ball, I think Roquan Smith makes 20 million bucks a year.
Right.
So running back is by far I think still essentially like the lowest paid position on the roster, maybe even lower paid than tight ends. So
yeah, I think
it's pretty wild how far it's gone.
I read something today because I was looking into something like there's 5 running backs making 10 million plus a year. The only position that's lower than that is center right now. There's 4 centers making 10 million plus a year. So, but here's the thing. If you look at it, it's not like if you look at our top 10 in threat ratings, like Isaiah Pacheco is a 7th rounder going into his 3rd year. Haven't had to pay him anything yet. Devon Achane's a 3rd rounder going into his 2nd year. Kyron Williams is, I don't know what round, but he's going into his 3rd year, and he wasn't a super high draft pick either. And then you have some older guys up top that would be like 2nd contract type guys like Christian McCaffrey, like Alvin Kamara. But those guys are fewer and far between. And by the time you get to the end of that 4th year, you're 27 years old. Some of these running backs stay in college 5 years. A lot of them do. And you're like 1 year away from the cliff. And teams are like, I could go draft a guy in the 3rd round that's 85% as productive as you. And 3 years from now, they're probably more productive than you while I'm still on this 2nd contract.
For sure. But think about, there is a disconnect in terms of the value that they bring. Because you just mentioned Pacheco, right? Like, what was the difference between the Chiefs 2021 team and 22-23? Well, they lost Tyreek Hill, but they added Pacheco. And like having a battering ram that can run the ball made a huge difference for them, right? Like How much did the Niners offense change when they brought in Christian McCaffrey? How much of a difference did Jahmyr Gibbs make to the Lions last year? How much of a difference did it make when A-Chain was playing for the Dolphins versus not? So, like, these guys actually have a huge impact on the dynamic of an offense. It's just, to your point, like this weird market inefficiency where none of them last past their first contract, and everyone knows that at this point.
Yeah, and I think what you might see is like, yeah, we know we don't want to give a running back a second contract, but more teams are going to start seeing like you just draft a guy and you plug and play him. So you would think the draft value of these guys would go up. Like they'd start getting drafted higher because more teams want to draft a running back. And we saw it last year with Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs both going in the top 12. And at least then you get paid some decent money on your first contract. Because as it stands, if you don't get drafted till the 7th round, you have to get to that second contract to really make some good money. So I think it's going to swing like one way or the other. Either they're going to start paying more guys on their second contract, or they're at least going to start getting drafted higher and making some more money on their first contract. But I think people understand the value there.
I also think, you mentioned Gibbs and Bijan, and what, like, if you could, who are guys that maybe their game can mold off of in the NFL, you would be like, oh, well, they're kind of like a Christian McCaffrey or an Alvin Kamara. So you're talking about added value. And I think that's the same thing, Scott. You mentioned linebackers. I think we've gotten to the point now in the NFL where cap space is so limited because of the quarterback and primarily the receiver and the edge. The edge positions have just ballooned so large that you have to really be able to add value now. So what you're seeing is running backs that are going in the first round are dynamic guys that can catch the ball. They're really fast. They can run the ball really well. And so that's, I think, to me, where we are with the running back, and really where we are a lot of times with some of these kind of like, low income positions like linebacker or running back.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know why I just thought about this, but did you all see after Jefferson signed what was the biggest deal ever for a receiver in the history of the NFL, that he makes the same amount of money as Jordan Poole?
Yeah. I mean,
It's like it's just wild.
Ridiculous.
No, I know. Like, Cody, you brought up the salary cap, and like that salary cap is divided by 53 players.
Right.
And so like it is wild still how, I mean, not that anyone's feeling sorry for NFL players, but they're still wildly undercompensated relative to baseball and basketball players.
Yeah,
oh, sure.
And the NFL is like, not only is it divided by 53 players, but they're shorter careers, and they're getting cheap and not free, but cheap labor out of the draft, and they just continue to cycle it through. And if you're not like more than marginally better than what you can get out of a draft pick, you're out of the league, because we don't want to pay a guy on a second contract when we could pay a guy on a rookie contract. And like a lot of that comes back to the CBA and the union. Like those guys that are in college aren't in the union. So the guys creating the CBA, they're already on their rookie contracts, and they're looking at their next contract, and they want that to be good. And so these it's the same way in all the leagues. The difference is in the NBA, there's not as much of an influx of talent coming in every single year. There's only 2 rounds in the draft. So more guys last longer, and then the salary cap split among 12 guys. So it's like there's a lot more money to go around.
Yeah. It takes NBA players a lot longer to like develop into productive assets too. Whereas like in the NFL, a lot of these dudes are plug and play.
And that's just rules. Like if NBA players had to be 3 years out of high school before they could come into the league, they'd be really good as rookies too. And so that's just part of the league rules and the way it's designed. And like the fact that the NFL has like a free minor league system in college football helps them a lot. They don't have to pay any of those dudes, and they're like ready to go when they get drafted. And we've seen guys that don't even get drafted and they contribute as rookies. So there's just a lot of talent coming in every single year. That's kind of an aside, talking about contracts and things like that. Just back to the running back conversation, we talked about the market and all of that. I think you hit on this a little bit, Cody, but just go into more detail. Like, what skills are most important for a running back? And you already touched on this, but what skills should a running back have if they do want to get one of those $12 to $14 million contracts, which is basically the cap of their market right now?
Well, I think it just comes down to catching the ball downfield. Catching the ball in a screen or just in the flat, okay, that's great. But can you catch the ball downfield? What is your route tree? I think if you really break it down analytically, you start going through these guys' route tree. Why are Kamara and McCaffrey always at the top of like fantasy? Well, it's because they're catching the ball down the field. They're not catching the ball 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage and then getting a couple yards, off of it. No, they're catching the ball downfield in space. They're going up against, DBs, linebackers, and they're taking advantage of it. I mean, it also changes the math for the offense. Is okay, instead of putting a linebacker on a running back, now we got to put a safety on a running back. Well, then that opens up the tight end position. So it's that constant cat and mouse game, and then maybe we don't play man, so we have to play zone, and then that changes your whole scheme anyway. So I think to me, when you look at it, if you want to have these major contracts, I think you have to be able to add value, not just running the ball. I think, and we're going to see this. So like when guys like A-Chain come in and it's their turn for their second contract, or I think a guy that has an opportunity to make a really good money on their second contract is a guy like Kyron Williams, who's a top 5 in passing, and top 5 like over in rushing, like a guy that can then make some money for you and for your team past the line of scrimmage, not behind the line.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on, and our threat ratings bear that out. You mentioned Kamara and McCaffrey. They're two guys who have gotten multiple deals as running backs, and they're 1 and 2 in not just receiving as running backs, but receiving beyond the line of scrimmage, on routes beyond the line of scrimmage, and we have it split out that way. And number 3 on receiving beyond the line of scrimmage is a guy who will probably get a second contract as well. That's Breece Hall. And he played on a putrid offense last year and was still like the number 4 fantasy running back in the league. So those are guys that add a ton of value. We're going to keep it short and sweet this week, so we'll finish off with this. Do you guys have, each of you, a running back that you think will be better this year and a running back that you think will be worse this year, based on situation or changes on their offense, anything that might cause an uptick or a downtick?
I'll go. I think somebody that's going to establish themselves as one of the top running backs in the NFL is going to be ETN with the Jaguars. I think he's progressed throughout. He adds value in the passing game, as well as he can then run the ball. I think he's going to be the premier back again for the Jaguars. He's somebody who's like right there on the cusp of being somebody that's a name. I really think somebody that's going to have a worse year is going to be Saquon Barkley. I think you go and look at what the Cowboys did with Zeke Elliott, and Pollard. They got the same coordinator. It's going to be the same issues that they had. The Chargers. You go look at last year. Eckler struggled in that system. He basically left to go to the Commanders. So I think you're seeing Barkley walking into a situation with an offensive coordinator that doesn't necessarily use the running back in the way that I think he sees himself as somebody who's dynamic, kind of a Christian McCaffrey-esque. Hey, I can catch the ball. I can run routes. Hey, I'm an elite running back. I really think he's going to go. I don't think that offensive line is as good as it has been in the past couple of years. And I just don't think that offense is going to build around Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. I'll go next and let Scott finish it out. I've got a guy who switched teams and a guy who didn't switch teams. Tony Pollard, there's a lot of hype around him when he was the dual back with Ezekiel Elliott, and then he played on the franchise tag last year. They thought he could be a premier back, but they did the smart thing, not giving him a long-term deal and making him prove it on the tag when he had never really been the premium number 1 back, and he didn't really live up to it. He moves over to Tennessee this year on a 3-year deal where he can pair with Tajay Spears, kind of be part of a two-headed monster again, not be asked to be a workhorse, but be asked to do what he did in the past, which is be part of a two-headed monster and be an explosive player, be used in the passing game. So I think Tony Pollard bounces back a little bit in a role that's more comfortable for him. And it showed last year. He went from 77.91 in threat ratings in 2022 to 61.17 in raw threat in 2023. And that's with increased opportunity. So it just didn't fit him. I think that bounces back up closer to the 2022 number this year. And then a guy that I think goes the other way, and this is just like looking at like what's the exception and what's the rule. James Conner's best ever raw threat score before last year was 63.94. And that's in 4 years from 2019 to 2022. And he was right in those 50 and 60 ranges every year. Last year, he jumps up to 92.27. And the Cardinals drafted a running back. I believe Trey Benson. Is that the one they got? And then they also have Amari DiMercato. Like, I just don't think the opportunity is the same for him this year. And I don't think he produces it as high of a level. So I'd say James Conner takes a step backwards this year.
Yeah. I think those are all good calls. So I'll finish this off maybe with I was struggling to find dudes that I thought were going to regress. I actually feel like it's going to be a big year for running backs, but I'll give you a couple names of guys I'm looking at that I think could break out. Biggest one is Rico Dowdle. You cannot convince me that Ezekiel Elliott is the number one back and going to carry the load in Dallas. So they're going to run the ball. I think he's actually a more complete back than people think, even though he was a lower, like we have a lot of history. We already talked about Pacheco of guys that can be lower drafted guys and turn into super productive running backs. So Rico Dowdle, J.K. Dobbins, Los Angeles Chargers, just because Harbaugh and Greg Roman are going to run the ball about 1 million times. So if Dobbins can stay healthy, I think he's going to get a ton of looks. Yeah, I saw the look on your face,
Big
Sasha.
if on Dobbins.
It's a big if on Dobbins. And then the last one I'll throw out there is everyone is excited about Derrick Henry in Baltimore. Sasha, the first time that we looked at our running back threat ratings, one dude that jumped off the page was Keaton Mitchell. And so if he looked really good in the limited time he got last year. So if he stays healthy, he's a really nice lightning complement to Derrick Henry's thunder and what the Ravens do in the running game.
That's a really good two-headed monster, and the Ravens have had a lot of trouble with running back health recently. So if they can just keep those two guys together and not have to like go out and get Melvin Gordon again, like 8 years past his prime, like they have like the last 8 years, it seems like, they'll be in better shape. You forgot one guy in the Cowboys backfield. Shout out K-State, Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce, probably gonna get cut.
I have a rule. I have a rule about shouting out running backs that are shorter than me.
Yeah, that's probably fair. That's a good rule to abide to. Just real quick to wrap up the running back conversation, the rookie class leaves a little bit to be desired this year. We always see a rookie jump in, whether it's a high draft pick or not, and like break out and do something for their team. Do you have your eye on any particular rookie, Cody, that could be like a key back for the team? The other thing is like some of the higher rated rookies among are like injured already, like or came in injured, so that's a problem too. But do you have one you have your eye on, Cody?
Yeah, actually, I'll give you one. Estime for the Broncos, I think, is going to be somebody to keep an eye on. That backfield is going to be wide open. I think he's going to be able to establish himself. If Williams doesn't necessarily have that pop, and again, we talk about this, a guy who could have 1,000 yards rushing one year, look like a world beater, gets hurt, and then just never is the same, just a step slower, never comes back. I think he's going to have an opportunity. And then the one other guy, kind of a, quote unquote gadget guy, is the Loud kid down in Las Vegas. I think he's got an opportunity to make some noise as well this year.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully Javonte Williams is not the Derrick Rose of football, but it seems like it could be trending that way because he was electric as a rookie and then has not come back from that injury yet. But time will tell. Sometimes second year back is better than first year back. That'll go ahead.
How are you guys feeling about Blake Corum in LA?
I think Sean McVay.
Whoa, not everyone at once. Not everyone at once here.
I think Sean McVay's more of a one-back guy, and Kyren Williams has that job. And like Corum's a good security blanket if Kyren were to get hurt. And like from a fantasy perspective, I know we're not talking a lot about that, but like if Kyren got hurt, Corum showed a huge nose for the end zone in college, so he could be like a viable asset there. But I think it takes an injury for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you, Sasha, because my only thing about bringing him up was just knowing that McVay's an all 11 guy. Like his 11 guys are the 11 guys that want to play. They're not really going to rotate a bunch of guys. I mean, obviously he's going to play with a fourth receiver, your second tight end, but like in terms of running back, I mean, those guys I think get pretty much limited carries. They pretty much leaned on Kyren Williams. I see him having an expanded role in what they're doing. One thing McVay, and the only reason why I brought up Kyren Williams as somebody who might be able to get a big second contract was because he's so down on being a running back from out of the backfield in the passing. I think McVay seeing the success that Shanahan has had, McDaniels has had. That's the one thing I think that's missing in that LA offense is a running back passing game that's not just a glorified screenplay. So I think that could be an evolution that I see. I'm just projecting on that. That's something that I would like to see. And to me, Corum is the second running back and probably is, maybe a end zone back if you want to go that far.
Yeah. And for the sake of fantasy owners of Kyren Williams, hopefully they don't use him in that role either. But it'll definitely be interesting. Next week is QB week, the moment you've all been waiting for. So we've got our QB threat ratings. One thing I'll point out, and I'll give you guys a chance if there's anything you want to say about QB threat ratings. We've got as you know, our threat ratings are cut play by play, we do them on a play by play basis, aggregated up, which means we can cut them in a bunch of different ways. Like with running backs, we did receiving, rushing, receiving behind the line of scrimmage, beyond the line of scrimmage. With quarterbacks, we got a bunch of different cuts. So we'll be able to analyze quarterbacks in a bunch of unique ways that you haven't thought about. Field area, blitz, no blitz, rushing, scrambling, designed run, you name it, we got it. So I'm really excited to get into that conversation starting next week.
Should be fun.
Yeah, I think the way that we look at quarterbacks is completely different than what a lot of people are doing, basically taking the receiver out of it. What is the quarterback actually doing? How is he producing downfield? I think to me, that's what makes it a little bit different. And some of the things that we see in our threat ratings are going to be very, very noteworthy and fun to talk about.
Awesome. That's going to do it for the matchup by Field Vision Sports. Give us a follow on X at Field Vision MI. Check us out on Instagram at Field Vision Sports. We're on TikTok as well. FieldVisionSports.com hosts our blog. We've got a lot of great information there. And the app will be out in less than 3 weeks. Get ready to subscribe to that. We'll be sending you links, everything you need for the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store. We've had a great time. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. We appreciate you joining the movement that is Field Vision Sports, the analytics platform built specifically for you, the fan. We look forward to taking you through this football season and beyond, and be sure to tell all your friends.